Hi, I'm Matt Dudman. I'm here in Davis, California to discuss Taiwanese-Chinese relations with Dr. Joseph Lin. Dr. Lin's been a faculty member and trustee at UC Davis. He's also a Taiwanese American and an important figure in Taiwan-China relations. Good morning, Dr. Lin. Why don't you start by explaining your role with Taiwan-China relations?
First, a bit of my background. I was born in Taiwan, just at the end of World War II. And at age 6, I moved to Japan, had my education in Japan. And my college education has been in the United States from 1962 to around 1975. And
So you've been in the States since when?
since 1962.
62, okay.
Yeah, I'm one of the original boat people. I actually took a boat
Really?
from Yokohama to Long Beach, California.
Wow.
Yeah, together with Japanese immigrants heading for Brazil, Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
So I am an original boat person.
Okay.
To answer your question about my involvement, I did not really get deeply involved with Taiwan issues until the former Taiwanese opposition president was thrown in jail. And it was definitely what we call political persecution.
When was this?
This was in 2008,
Okay.
when the current government, which is the KMT, very pro-China government, took over, immediately handcuffed President Chen and threw him in jail. And after about 3 or 4 years in very, very brutal conditions, what Westerners would probably define as torture. He was suffering physical ailments as well as mental ailments. And the media started to cover this issue, with the government denying any physical or mental problems, and proponents of President Chen saying otherwise. And I was asked to see if we could get some medical experts from the United States to visit the president in jail. And I did that in 2012. That's when I really got seriously involved in Taiwan issues, and to be honest, for the first time, learned accurate historical facts.
Aha.
Yeah. Taiwan, as many people might know, has been under martial law for some 40 some odd years, when Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalist Party moved to Taiwan.
So let's go ahead and go back to the 40s and the history. Start from the beginning there.
The revolution, the so-called revolution against the Jing Dynasty, was in 1911 with the formation of the Republic of China. Okay, at that time it was called the Republic, which is drastically different from the Jing Dynasty, which is what do you call that? Imperialist.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of war, a lot of people killed.
And at that time, Taiwan was part of Japan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's very important. I'm glad you brought this up. In 1895, at the end of the first Sino-Japanese War, China lost and signed the Treaty of Shimonoseki, which effectively ceded Taiwan to Japan.
Okay.
Taiwan, before that time, was a province under the Jing Dynasty, but was only a province for some 7-8 years. And that's essentially the actual real connection with China, was that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, prior to that, it was loosely, quote unquote, part of the Jing Dynasty and so forth. But Taiwan was a renegade, I wouldn't say province, because that's not what it is. It's a renegade island with pirates and criminals and so forth. So China wanted to get nothing to do with Taiwan to start with. Okay? So it was a very natural thing for them to do when they lost the war with Japan. Immediately, okay, you can have this savage island and cede it to Japan. And of course, with the Japanese, Japanese were brutal when they came in. In those days, everybody was brutal. Okay? But ultimately, on the second half of under Japanese rule, Taiwan became very peaceful, and the relationship between Taiwanese and the Japanese improved substantially. Uh, for that reason, my forefathers, my father, and myself, and all the people that I know during that period looked very, very favorably to Japan. Yeah, and there was a time when people did not have to lock their doors. Crime, violent crime was very, very low, almost non-existent. And of course, when the KMT, the Nationalist Party, invaded Taiwan, I like to use the word invaded because that's exactly what it was. Promptly crime increased and all the negatives of what made the Nationalist Party, the KMT, lost the war with China. There was a lot of corruption, no ethics, you name it. They've done every one of those immoral things, and that's why they lost China to start with. And when they came into Taiwan, they promptly instilled into the Taiwanese people those bad habits.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So we come into the 40s, and what happens?
In 1945, when Japan lost the war, they were asked to vacate Taiwan within 1 year. And my understanding is during that period of time, the Japanese were not allowed to take back their possessions, take the possessions with them. And Chiang Kai-shek started to come in after 1945. And during that period, Chiang Kai-shek sent his cronies to Taiwan to kind of mop up the dissidents and make the place habitable for the grand entry of the Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek.
Okay.
So in 1947, during this period of time, people can read, you can Google the 228 incident or 228 massacre in Taiwan, and you will read about all the details. But during that period of time, Chiang Kai-shek's cronies and the governor, Chen Yi, actually brutally murdered some 20 to 30,000 Taiwanese. Most of them intellectuals, lawyers, politicians, anybody that has a mind that's vocal, that the KMT felt threatened, were annihilated.
Okay, this is 47.
1947.
Okay.
That was when, and actually the massacre continued until 49, when Chiang Kai-shek made this grand entrance to Taiwan and set up the new capital of the Republic of China.
Okay, in 1949.
1949. Keep in mind that most Taiwanese at that time do not speak Chinese. They all speak Japanese and the Taiwanese dialects. The Japanese never tried to eradicate the local dialects. But the Chinese are very good at doing these things. So look at Tibet, for example. They try to destroy the culture by, first of all, destroying their language and try to make them dependent on the government.
It's funny you should mention that. We actually study the secession of Quebec from Canada, the attempted secession, in class.
Oh, you did?
Which failed, but it's one of our examples, and another one being Taiwan.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 49, the government is exiled from China to Taiwan.
Yes. And of course, immediately Chiang Kai-shek imposed martial law, which lasted till 1980 something. I think it was 42 or 43 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can check the Google. But so for 40-some years, probably 2 full generations of Taiwanese were indoctrinated to believing that they are Chinese. If you know the history of Taiwan, and I gave you the 400-year history, yeah, I would encourage people to read that, because you will see that the Taiwanese people are not Han Chinese. They're not exclusively Han Chinese. Yes, there was definitely influence, but Taiwanese people are unique. We're mixed. Aborigines, Dutch, Spanish, English, Mongolian, Polynesian. It's all there.
So in 1949, when the government's exiled, the old government, there's a new government in China. So is that 2 separate countries at that time?
Definitely 2 separate countries. They were still firing artillery between the nationalist ROC-held islands of Quemoy and Matsu, just a few miles offshore in China. They were still bombarding each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for a long, long time. And Chiang Kai-shek brainwashed the Taiwanese people to think that he has to return to China to recover China from the communists. Communist bandits is what he called them. And that brainwashing went on for another 30 years.
So during this period, we have the Taiwan is essentially capitalist, supported by the United States, and the original Chinese area has become communist, supported by the Soviet bloc.
Yes, and
right?
Taiwan under the ROC was officially the recognized China as far as the United States is concerned. And so during that period of time, during the Cold War, and through the Korean War, in fact, I want to digress a little bit. When the Korean War started, Chiang Kai-shek wanted to send his troops to help, and Truman wisely turned him down because Chiang Kai-shek would have taken that opportunity and pushed all the way into China. So that was a good decision. At that time, Truman had already told Chiang Kai-shek that don't ever think that you're going to set foot in China again. It's just not going to happen. So Chiang Kai-shek knew that he was not going to regain China. But what did he indoctrinate the Taiwanese people? He used that as a reason to basically strip Taiwan of its assets, of its resources, and kept feeding his military and sending what's the word I want to use? Support in any form back to China to the KMT pro-KMT forces in China. So the Taiwanese people essentially was ripped of their own belongings after the ROC came into
So at some point more recently, the situation changed, right? So the Taiwan capitalists supported by the United States switched positions, I believe, just in the past, 5-10 years?
Actually, no. What happened was when President Carter decided to recognize China, it's communist China. I believe it was 1974, 72.
Okay.
I forget exactly.
30 years ago.
Yeah, 30 years ago. That's when ROC, Republic of China, officially became a non-entity around the world. But the ROC continued to indoctrinate the Taiwanese people into believing that Taiwan is the Republic of China and the Republic of China is on Taiwan. Okay? They still hold the notion that China is one, Taiwan included, but split into two areas. Okay, so you got the mainland area, and then you got the Taiwan area. But they're all part of one China. The reason why Taiwan is such an enigma to a lot of people is because of this archaic Cold War one China policy that still prevails today. Both China and the United States agree on the one China policy. What they don't agree, China believes that Taiwan is part of China. United States acknowledges China's position, but doesn't take a position as to who owns or who has sovereignty over Taiwan.
So let's talk about sovereignty and secession. In class, we kind of have talked about internal determination. In other words, when there's an entity that wants to become separate and sovereign, part of that is assuming that the people have a unified culture and desire that. What are the feelings about people in Taiwan?
First of all, I'd like to address the term secession.
Okay.
Secession assumes that you were originally part of. Okay. When Taiwan was ceded to Japan, all the historical so-called jurisdiction and so forth of China over Taiwan was gone. The Chinese love to use the words colonization by the Japanese. No, it wasn't colonization. Japan got Taiwan after the end of a war where Japan was victorious when China ceded Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
That is different from Japan coming in with forces, taking it, okay, which is colonization.
Being given and taking are different.
Two different things.
Okay.
Yes. So first of all, the word secession is probably inaccurate.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is that because of this one China policy that was enacted in 1970s, the Taiwanese people have been brainwashed to think that Taiwan historically has always been part of China, culturally and otherwise. And the attempt to destroy the local dialects have been largely successful. If you go to Taiwan today, very few young Taiwanese people can speak Taiwanese fluently. I still speak Taiwanese fluently because I left Taiwan when I was 6 years old, and I've never been brainwashed.
So would you say, by and large, the people of Taiwan today do not have a sense of separatism or independence or sovereignty? They feel like they're part of China, the ROC?
No. That's in fact what happened last year, the year before last, the Sunflower Movement, is essentially expressing the frustration of the younger people. The people that revolutionized Taiwan in the Sunflower Movement, where they took over the legislature, demanding that the continued interaction, trade pact with China be more transparent. Basically, these young people essentially under 30, in their 20s and 30s, they have not been brainwashed. They were born after Taiwan became a young democracy. So they have no feelings about, China being... Yes,
they aren't bringing baggage along.
No, they don't have, exactly right, they don't have this thing hanging over them. Okay? And so they look at it wait a minute, why in the heck do we, Taiwanese, born and raised in Taiwan, whether you're originally from the mainland or any other place in the world, they identify themselves as Taiwanese under a democracy, under a very robust democracy. Why in the heck would we want to be part of China, where they're going to take away all our freedom of speech and whatever? So no. To answer your question, yes, they speak Mandarin and all that, but in their heart, they identify. In fact, the majority, something the last I heard, it was about 70 to 80%, identify themselves as Taiwan.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So another thing that we haven't discussed explicitly is statehood and qualifications for being an independent sovereign state. And there are certain requirements acknowledged under international law as to what you need or should have as in terms of qualities in order to be a separate sovereign state. One of which is a defined territory. I think that's pretty obvious here. It's an island.
Yes.
So it's very clear that Taiwan, as far as statehood goes, qualifies for a defined territory just because of the physical geography of the situation.
Yes.
Another one is a permanent population, not a transitory population. And would you say that that's...
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Permanent population there. Independent government. That's probably a difficult one, but we'll talk about that.
Well, in independent government, as far as the Republic of China on Taiwan is concerned, yes, it's an independent government. Completely separate from China. And has never been, by the way, just for your information, in 1945, when, going back to after the war, when Taiwan was ceded, when Japan gave up Taiwan to the Allied forces headed by the United States, guess what? The People's Republic of China was not even there. Okay? In the Treaty of Shimonoseki, the People's Republic of China was not there. Neither was the Republic of China. So for these two entities to come out and stake a claim on Taiwan is kind of, they own the moon too, I guess.
Well, it's worth a try, maybe.
It's worth a try, yeah. So, I don't know if I answered your question there, but basically, yes, separate, territorial-wise, government-wise, population-wise.
So there's no need, government-wise, it's a separate government, independent. There's no need to go ask permission from any other government to do anything.
Of course.
Yeah. What about international relations? Other countries recognizing and dealing with them separately as a sovereign nation, and governmental connections, treating Taiwan as a state, as an independent sovereign unit?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. In fact, I and many Taiwanese Americans and others have worked very, very hard to get recognition in the United Nations. John McCain once told me in a roundtable discussion, he says, you advocate for Taiwan to join the United Nations. Let me suggest that you forget all about that, because China will veto it anyway. Why don't you build up your defenses strong so that it will deter China from any adventure? That's an admonition that I pass on to anybody that would listen. Under the One China policy, Taiwan is not recognized as a country because of the Republic of China. That moniker.
By whom? Recognized by whom?
This was by the world community, by the United States especially, because when Carter shifted recognition, the Republic of China effectively became a non-entity. But it's still an entity in the governance of Taiwan. Okay, now, to answer your question about diplomatic relations and so forth. So because of that de-recognition of Taiwan, Congress passed the Taiwan Relations Act, and you can Google that also. It'll show you, it'll state all the things that the United States is under law to do to protect Taiwan from aggression by China. They set up so-called trade offices, economic offices. Around the world, they all have different names, but what it is a de facto embassy and de facto consulate. Unofficial is the name, okay? But you do your visas and passports and everything through these branches throughout the world, okay? So, yeah, it's not by name, but de facto embassies and consulates still exists. And with the change in government in Taiwan, these consulates and embassies also change. For example, I'll give you an example. When President Chen, the imprisoned president, the political prisoner, became president, I noticed a significant change in the consul general in San Francisco. I went into the office. Everybody spoke Taiwanese. So what he did was he revived the Taiwanese culture. After President Ma took office in 2008 and he jailed President Chen, you go back, all back to Mandarin. They hardly speak Taiwanese.
And you've been active on behalf of some of these parties, personally.
Yes. I, especially in a mission to save President Chen. He is now, by the way, has been out on medical parole since January of last year.
Review for us a little just kind of the recent history there of who the actors are and what positions they take.
You're talking about the politicians? Okay. Well, President Chen, of course, was the first opposition president to become president.
What time period?
That's 2000.
Okay.
So from 2000 to 2008, that's 2 terms. He was president of the Republic of China. Okay, but with a Taiwan independence
stance.
Yeah. In 2008, President Ma of the KMT, that's the Nationalist Party, took office. To currently, he is a lame duck. He's still got 4 months left in his term. Okay? So, the recent election in January 16th, you have Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, who I am very familiar with. I've interacted with her for the last 4 or 5 years. She won a landslide victory. The historical part of this whole election is that the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, won a landslide in the legislature. So they now have 60 some odd seats out of 113. So well, solidly in the majority. Together with this, the third party, the so-called New Power Party, made up of people from the Sunflower. And some of these young advocates, I know them personally. They won 4 seats in the legislature, but they work together with the DPP.
Okay.
But also as a check and balance, because the New Power Party is very pro-China, very pro-Taiwan, pro-independence, so they can kind of watch over the DPP being the majority and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things there, a lot of excitement going on right now, and inauguration is May 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tsai and I knew each other from my first participation in the congressional reception in Washington, D.C. in 2012. She lost, of course, the election because of Obama's interference with the election. But this is well known everywhere. Everybody knows that the national security chief, I think it was in the White House, called Financial Times to warn everybody that we don't know what Dr. Tsai will do. We're not certain. So what Obama did was raise doubts in the electorate's minds. And so she lost by 800,000 votes. Now you can argue, was that the main contributing factor? Many say it was. 2015. Last year we did another reception for her, and I was there and help setting up and welcoming her to the U.S. House of Representatives. And this time, the approach was quite different. We worked very hard in the intervening 2 years to try to lobby for the opposition meaning the Democratic Progressive Party, as a full democracy. Democracy is growing. Democracy is practiced in Taiwan. The people want change. And with this democratic principle, we pushed and supported, and a lot of our congressional friends have been vocal about this, and we appreciate it. We thank them for support. And that in part led to this tremendous victory. So that's how I got to know the incoming president of Taiwan.
So what would you say the near future holds? Where is this situation headed?
I think that Dr. Tsai had already said on many occasions publicly that, and in fact more significantly at the CSIS, that is the Strategic Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. I was there when she presented her policy. At that time she said she wants to maintain the status quo. And the status quo means that she will not raise tensions across the Taiwan Strait. But that's not to say she would ignore the wishes of the people. She emphasized democracy, and therefore the people's wishes would trump everything else. Even the outdated U.S. One China policy, to be honest with you. Now, I can say that because I'm not running for political office, so it's fine. But I think that inside every Taiwan patriot, there's this yearning to be a separate country, such as the Republic of Taiwan, not China. But this name is such a fake, that such an artificial name that many today, I would say the majority of Taiwanese today, would love to get rid of it.
When do you think that independent statehood will happen?
Very good question. We cannot. It's a funny thing, during martial law, we talk about Taiwan independence. Today, we cannot talk about Taiwan independence. And Taiwan is a full-fledged democracy. But we cannot utter these words. Dr. Tsai would never say those words. In her campaign speeches, not one word about independence. She talks about protecting Taiwan's sovereignty. Okay? Because protecting Taiwan's sovereignty is not inconsistent with the ROC on Taiwan. Okay? So, in order to be not a troublemaker, she's very, very careful. So that's
But one day that could change.
Yes, and I can say this for a fact, that as the younger people start to gain more influence in Taiwan, and with the incoming U.S. administration that's going to be more strict with China, instead of letting China run loose in the South China Sea, U.S. has responsibility in what has happened in South China Sea. And that's another story for another couple of hours. But I think more importantly, the issue of independence. Everybody in Taiwan believes that stable relations with China is important. But equally important is to never compromise Taiwan's sovereignty and Taiwan dignity. And no preconditions when interacting with China. In other words, China cannot say, Dr. Tsai, we'll talk to you only if you acknowledge the One China policy or the so-called 1992 consensus. Dr. Tsai has very wisely avoided talking about that. Whether
Too divisive.
Too divisive, and also, too very provocative. And I think the United States would not look too kindly at Taiwan if Taiwan were to do anything that would increase the tension. You know, that 800-pound gorilla across the strait is not something to fool around with.
Right.
So I think the DPP is playing the cards right. I hope that she will continue to watch out for the ordinary Taiwanese people, which she has pledged to do. Taiwan is a very progressive country, and it's going to continue this way. And I would hope that the United States would recognize that at some point you do have to deep six the One China policy and come up with something that really reflects reality of today. Okay?
Well, that's a fantastic summary. I think we've covered what we need to.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lin, thank you so much for your time. We really
Thank you, man.
appreciate it.
When are you going to treat me to beer?
Let's do it tonight.
Okay, just let me know.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.